Hello and welcome everyone to our Wednesday News Hour, where we hear from social entrepreneurs and their teams all around the world about timely topics and solutions. My name is Shantanu Paul. We're thrilled today to have you joining us to hear from Ashoka's global community and specifically from Smita Chakraburtty, who's a social entrepreneur and the founder of Prison Aid and Action Research. We're excited to have the many of you joining us from Ashoka's community, as well as those joining us from Smita's community as well. For the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be chatting about the very fascinating concept of open prisons. But before we get started, there's a few points of housekeeping that I just wanted to mention. First and foremost, we'd absolutely love to hear the questions that you have. So you can go down on the Q&A section below next to the chat and write your questions, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible towards the second half of the presentation. For those of you who wish to use captioning, you can select the three dots down near the chat below and select more. And then you can click show subtitles, and that will bring up the subtitles for you. And with that, I would love to introduce you all to today's guest, Smita Chakraburtty. Smita is a social entrepreneur, an activist, and a researcher who founded the Prison Action Aid and Research Project in India. Smita's been on a lifelong professional journey to mainstream the concept of open prisons in India, a concept that flips the current closed prison system, one that is defined by complete confinement and absolute denial of liberty, to one that is graded, reformative, and progressive in nature. She's been rigorously studying the social and economic benefits of shifting to this new type of prison and using her really concrete advocacy skills to scale this idea across various states in India. And with that, I'd love to welcome Smita to today's session. Hi, Smita. How are you?
Hi, Shantanu. So nice to be over here, and nice to be speaking to you and the community. And it always feels good to be speaking about prisons, you see, because I don't think many people discuss prisons in their everyday life. It's not a part of the mainstream conversation. And yes, and the concept of open prison it's been a journey. It's also been a personal journey. It's not only about social change, but it's also about changing mindsets and speaking to people about a different perspective of a prison system, because we are all used to, we always think of bars, prisons, the entire the image of the imageries that we are used to from prison is of bars and tall walls, locks, guards. And from that point, speaking about a system which is an open system, which is of a minimum security system, is actually, it's actually pretty startling for a lot of people. So yes, I'm excited about this conversation.
Fascinating. And with that, Smita, I think you've just given us a really good glimpse into what we're about to get into. But I'd just love to get into the first question that I had for you. And the first question is really about what you've just spoken about, which is your journey into understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. So I understand from the conversations that I've had with you that there are about 480,000 or so inmates in prisons in India today. And earlier, you were actually given the task of inspecting all 58 prisons of the state in Bihar. The fascinating thing about this is that you not only did that, but you actually went and spoke to each one of the 30,000 inmates that were there. One by one, you spoke to each one and you understood what they were going through, what their experiences were like. And so my question for you, Smita, is, can you tell me a bit about what you learned from those conversations that you had with each one of these 30,000 inmates? And then as a result of that, how did the insight into the idea of open prisons actually come about?
Yeah, so this was a very interesting journey, because I was commissioned by the Chief Justice of Bihar to inspect all the prisons of the state. The order was to enter each and every prison, each and every barrack, speak to each and every prisoner of that state. Now, the state happened to have 30,000 prisoners, and I was wondering, it'll take me half a lifetime to speak to all of them and come up with a report, or reporting to the court. So at that point, and I was a little hesitant because I'm not from Bihar, and that's not my home state. And I was thinking of language problem of interacting. But when I initially entered the prison guards used to bet on me, saying that, she will not last in Bihar, because Bihar is supposed to be one of the most notorious places, Bihar prisons. But yes, but when I entered the prison, I actually felt safe, because the prisoners, they made me feel safe, because they there was a high moral standing when it came to the prisoners, because I didn't have any bodyguards or anybody to I did not take, I refused to accept police or bodyguards when I entered the prison, because it defeats the purpose of interacting with the prisoners. When I entered, I wanted to find out about their living conditions, their condition of legal aid, or the status in which their case is, or the concept of access to justice, and trying to understand prison conditions, their living conditions. So this was the first time in Indian history where the court was commissioning a social researcher to enter prison and speak to the inmates. And so for the prisoners, for me, it was a new thing. For the judge, it was the new thing. And for the prisoners also, it was a very new thing, that there was this little young person, like a researcher walking into the prison, and the court has commissioned her. So I was hesitant. They were hesitant, and they told me that, don't worry, you're safe amongst us. Your security is our concern. And within the first 2 hours of that prison visit, I knew that this is going to be a fantastic journey, very interesting journey. So yes, so to make a statement like this, that I felt safe walking through 58 prisons of Bihar, interacting with 30,000 prisoners. I felt safe inside the prison, surrounded by prisoners, and there were overcrowded prisons. There were no space to stand. And I was in packed places with no bodyguards, nobody. So, and I felt safe. That itself was a big learning. So so that from there I got this understanding that prisoners are not really the demons that they're meant to be. We actually work on that social perspective of each and every prisoner to be like the, let's say, I mean, the monsters that they are meant to be. But in reality, it's a much complex situation. um you the term criminal is actually it's a social taboo. It's a stigma which is there. So and criminal is a very big, you can't define an individual by an instance, by a like in a moment. An individual moment can't define an individual, right? Individual is more than an incident, because the criminal justice system operates on an incident. Like the police investigates an incident of crime, the court decides, or I mean, the court, the lawyer, the police, everybody operates on an incident, but an individual is removed from that incident. Now there are lots of factors which actually work behind incarceration, where there can be systemic bias behind incarceration. Access to justice is very expensive actually, if we speak about it. So basically, I mean, people behind bars, the prisoners, majority of them are one-time offenders, accidental offenders, or they haven't perpetrated any offense at all. They just got stuck because uh, because they couldn't afford a proper legal defense. So yes. So anyway, so that, I mean, so this high security prison didn't make sense once we interacted with prisoners. So anyway, from there, my big learning is, uh, anytime people tell me, like when I counter this question on open prison, that, oh, what about the social security, safety, and all of that, I always ask that, have you ever interacted with a prisoner? Do you know how they are? Or because they are really not what you are made to see in, say, movies, or the social perception is pretty far removed from reality. That's what I would always like to say.
And I wanted to ask as well, Smita, based on this critical bit of research that you were able to do over a period of time, of course, as we both know, the concept of open prisons isn't something that you introduced, but it was already existent in the state of Rajasthan from many, many years back. How did that idea or that old idea that already existed but didn't really get moving really come back to you after you did this research?
So that Bihar prison inspection was, like I told you, it was a historical moment, and then the Supreme Court of India took up the prison report, because my report was published by the Bihar State Legal Services Authority, and the Supreme Court took so motu cognizance of the report. The Parliamentary Standing Committee, Department of Law and Justice, it took up the report. The National Human Rights Commission took up the report, and lots of magazines made it their cover story of that Bihar prison. And I went on telling everywhere that I felt safe inside prison. I spent 8 months inside Bihar prison. Like, I would enter the prison in the morning, come out late in the evening. There were times when I was there inside till 11, 12 in the evening, because it was a huge task, and I didn't have a team. I didn't know how to complete the task. So my team was composed of prisoners themselves. We were doing surveys. I had trained them how to do surveys and all of that. And we were working as a team. So it was fascinating. Now, because there was so much of attention that report got, and institution attention, like NHRC or the Supreme Court taking it up. So the Supreme Court made it mandatory for all states to conduct Bihar-like prison inspections. And I had come to the parliament because the parliament had invited me to speak on Bihar prison conditions. And that day I got this invite from Rajasthan to visit the state and inspect, because the Supreme Court order said that to conduct Bihar-like prison inspection. So Rajasthan invited me to conduct Bihar-like prison inspection. And because it was logistically, Jaipur was close to Delhi, so a lot of states had invited me. Just incidentally, I went to Rajasthan, and when I went over there, the DG prison told me that, we have a unique problem, and we will have to conduct prisoner eviction, and because they don't want to leave prison premises. And I was like, I spoke to 30,070 prisoners on record, and I've never come across a single individual saying that they don't want to leave prison, because the whole purpose is to go out of prison. And yeah, so and then I said, okay, he said, maybe I'll have to do lathi charge and all that. I don't want to do that. Maybe you can go and speak to them, because the prisoner thinks, the prisoner community, they feel that you're somebody who actually can speak on their behalf. So I was fascinated by that. But the superintendent took me to this place, and I was told by the court that you should visit this prison. And when I visited so I was waiting in front of this, it was like a village. I was standing over there, and I was waiting for the superintendent to take me to a prison. He just took me to this place, and he disappeared, and he got busy getting me tea, or so I told him that, we've come over here. Can we now visit the prison? I mean, it's getting late. I have work. I have to report to the court. And he was like, this is the prison. And I was so baffled, because there was no bar, there was no wall, there was no gate, there was no guard, no uniformed men. And I couldn't believe that was a prison. And then a community, a group of people came, men, women, children, they all came, and they said that, we can't leave the prison right now. Can you extend our stay? And it took me some time to process that this is a village, but this is also a prison. So it was fascinating. And when I saw that, I was thinking that if this has been there for the last 70 years, why not? I mean, this can be spread across the country. So that was that moment. And yeah, so that's how I discovered this open prison system, which is not my idea. It has been there in India from 1954, and it's a successful model. It has stood the test of time, and it's a humane alternative to the closed prison system.
But you definitely are today, Smita, the person who is championing this very old concept and trying to mainstream it as the norm in Indian society and beyond. And I wanted to ask you gave us a fascinating insight just now into what an open prison actually is. So you mentioned that there are no bars, there were no guards, people were walking around everywhere, right? So for our audience, especially those who are joining us from outside of India, could you give us a bit of an insight in terms of what is fundamentally different between an open prison compared to one of a closed prison, especially in the context of India?
Yes. See, if, even not only in the context of India, even the global context, prison is a high security zone, and it is meant for offenders and very serious offenders. But the irony is that in India, we also have under trial prisoners staying inside prison. That means majority of the inmates, we are not even sure whether they have perpetrated an offense or not. They are subject to be proven by the court. And even if you see the population of conviction, I mean, convicted prisoners form around 30% of the population. But these convictions can be false convictions because, as I said earlier, the access to justice is a very expensive exercise, and it's a long drawn battle. So the open prison system is radically opposite from the closed prison system, because prisons are about tall walls, bars, security. But you see the nature of inmates, the prisoner demography, if you see people, they might be in conflict with the law. There can be this huge question whether they have perpetrated the crime or not. But even if they have perpetrated, majority of offenders are accidental offenders. And they are one-time offenders, which means that they have no criminal antecedent. Even if a crime was perpetrated, it was perpetrated accidentally or in an unthinkable moment of rage or and even our society, we justify revenge, right? I mean, we justify violence. We don't say that somebody killed somebody and we all sit together and talk about it and forgive everybody, and then that doesn't happen. Revenge is glorified, so justice is seen as revenge. So there are different categories of offense in which say revenge offenses are a very small percentage, and in reality also habitual offenders, like people who have criminal antecedent or they are organized crime members, this percentage of people, it's less than 1% of inmates, prisoners are habitual offenders. Majority of the prisoners are just they are just victims of their circumstances. People who couldn't afford a proper defense, couldn't afford a lawyer, or people who couldn't or people who accidentally perpetrated an offense. And the basic difference is that these people, uh, they are not violent offenders. They pose no threat to the society. And by keeping them behind bars, you're actually institutionalizing violence. You see, the entire prison architecture itself, it's 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 extremely, it's not in a democratic process. You cannot cage human beings. It's actually a cage structure, and it's see, we talk about prison, and most people, I'm Shantanu, even you haven't visited a prison, right? But if say you're meeting me, you're talking to me today, and then in the evening I say, okay, thank you, nice meeting you, and then somebody just puts me inside a cage, because the very concept that this person is going to be a violent monster is actually a misconstrued notion, because majority of the offenders are not violent offenders, and they pose no threat to the society. Then again, if we see that people who are elderly, people who are physically infirm, they're women, they're even children, and people who are like young offenders. And the open prison system is radically different, because this is a system which is a trust-based system. It is a system where you see the onus of reform, because in prison in India, we actually say the prison is a correctional institution. It is based on the principle of reformation. So reformation can't be superimposed, right? It is a choice. So open prison is that system where you're staying in minimum security. Nobody is there to monitor you. And there are 2 roll calls in the morning. You are free, you stay with your family, you go out in the morning, you come back in the evening, you earn a livelihood. So there's a lot of dignity that this system builds into the open prison system brings in a lot of dignity. And it's a question of graded liberty that comes in. So, we always use this metaphor of a kite. We use that as a logo of our organization of Paar. We always say that kite, it's a symbol of freedom, but there is a fine thread to it. So if you break it, I mean, it's easy to break out. So in an open prison, if people ask me that don't the prisoner run away, it's actually prisoners don't run away, because they've earned that liberty and dignity out of a lot of struggle. So if you stay in an open prison, if an inmate goes out of an open prison and doesn't return, the police is definitely going to catch them and put them behind bars again. So they lose their liberty. In open prison, it's a trust-based system. That means it's giving you a lot of dignity in that individual. And secondly, the concept of liberty is so precious that it can't be equated. So in an open prison system, liberty is the incentive. You see, that is why it is a successful system. So it's radically different from the closed prison system. And here the prisoners, they run the prison. In Rajasthan, the open prisons are governed and monitored by prisoners governing bodies. And they pay for their own electricity, they pay for their fooding. Only the lodging is demarcated as a prison, which is given by the government. And here they stay with their families. That's why in open prison in Rajasthan, the prison guards, they don't even wear uniform, because the prisoner children, they stay. There are schools inside these open prisons. And these guards, they don't wear uniforms because they don't want the prisoner children to know that they're staying in a prison. So I think it's a fascinating system. One has to see it to believe it. So it's radically different from the closed prison system. And again, I want to repeat that this is a 70-year-old system. It has stood the test of time. The rate of recidivism is negligible. It's a cost-effective system, and it's a successful system because the rate of recidivism is negligible. So it's the rehabilitation, reformation, social reintegration. All these principles are they're actually respected in this prison system. So I would say that it can be easily expanded across the country, across the world.
Incredible. In fact, Smita, we have a lot of questions coming in about the mindset shifts that are required in order to scale an idea like this. But before we go there, I think we have two specific questions about the open prison system itself. One very quickly is, in 1954, who was it that created the system? And then is there this system that exists anywhere else in the world?
See, in 1954, there were these the Gandhians who were behind bars themselves. So you see that outside, like if I didn't enter Bihar prison, I wouldn't have known about prisoners. Similarly, these people, the governor of Rajasthan, and a couple of freedom fighters who were behind bars during the freedom struggle of the country, when they came out and the country fought its freedom struggle, and immediately after independence, they thought that the colonial prison structure needs to go, and therefore that these were the people, a group of people, they decided to set up the open prison system. Now, open prisons are there in some of the states in India, and open prisons are there in Scandinavia, and there's a European model of open prison. But what is fascinating about the Rajasthan prison model is that it's the quantum in which it operates. Like in Rajasthan, in Sanganer open prison, which is in the heart of the city, there are more than 300 prisoner families staying over there. I mean, you're talking about a huge village, and where prisoners, they are staying and they're maintaining the prison themselves. And I mean, this quantum, like if you see Scandinavian prison, it is designed for a very small number of inmates. Even in India, there are a couple of states which have open prisons, but there they release inmates during the end of their sentence for social reintegration. Like like you keep somebody behind bars for 20 years, then the last 1 year of the sentence, you keep the person in an open setup so that the person gets acclimatized to the society. And I've come across cases where the prisoner refused to go out and kind of came back to the closed prison. But in Rajasthan, what they do is, after spending 1/3 percentage one third of your sentence, even so people at the age of 30, 40 who have license sentence, and they're like, just after completing 1/3 of their sentence, they go to that open. So it's about a second chance. It's not about the last leg of adjustment back to the society, but it's about a second chance where you get an opportunity to rebuild your life. that's where, I mean, that's the moral standing from which the open prison in Rajasthan was set up. And again, when I did this study in Rajasthan, the High Court, the High Court told me inspect the closed prisons, and I said I know the closed prisons, but I want to study the open prison of your state. So the Justice K.S. Javeri, he told me, he was the acting Chief Justice at that point, and he told me that TK, you can do the study for 6 months, and but then you'll have to do the prison, the big prison inspection. I said, okay, I'll do that. And then this open prison study was again taken up by the Supreme Court, and that is where the court ordered that this, like, because we are seeing it as a solution to the traditional closed prison system. It's a solution-based model. And that's where the Supreme Court ordered that this system needs to be expanded to every state of the country. And I was demanding, like, we should have 2 open prisons in every district of this country. That's a long walk to go, but it's a good start.
Incredible. And with that, I think there are an incredible amount of questions which are coming in for us. I want to try and get to all the questions, but in particular, I wanted to ask a question that's been asked from Irene in Spain. She's asking about this, if you've taken any specific actions or initiatives to change the mindset in society about this idea itself, right? And on top of that, Smita, I also had a question related to what Irene is asking. Of course, an idea like this would be difficult to scale, because you have, I mean, from a political perspective, you wouldn't get voters buy-in, right? You have the bureaucracy, you have other sorts of mindsets, and whole lot of other challenges. So how do you go about normalizing and scaling an idea like this that's so difficult from a mindset
perspective? Yes, there are 2 perspectives to it. So for us, for me to so I've met prisoners. I know them by their names. I've gone to their families. I've met them inside prison. I've met them outside prison. I work with them. I meet them every day. So my social life comprises of a lot of people who have been in prison or just come out of prison, like that. So for that, we thought through this, and we have this social media page which is called Open Prison Voices, where we bring about stories of inmates, of prisoners. They speak in their first person voice, and they speak about their experiences. And if you go to the Instagram handle called Open Prison Voices, you'll see that there are prisoners. They talk about their everyday achievements, like somebody set up a business, somebody's daughter has passed final exams, somebody got to wear color clothes, and it's really fascinating. And we do this just to bring in that sense of people that these are prisoners, these are inmates, they are no different from any of us. They're just there, they are just like you and me. One is that. Second is how to popularize the concept. We've used Google Map as a tool, you see, because a very large problem of having this prison is a taboo. And this taboo is because nobody is exposed to a prison, because prisoners are invisible citizens, right? They are silent citizens. They are citizens, but they are silent. And they're institutionally silenced, right? The system works to silence. You don't hear prisoners being activists or speaking out or writing. It's not that. Secondly is large prison institutions. They're also invisible institutions. So what we used was Google Maps, and where we went around, we did nothing. We just tagged prisons on Google Maps. We just did latitude, longitude. So now, say if you book a radio cab and you're traveling, you'll get to see wherever you are, at least in India. There are nearly 1,400, a little more than 1,400 prisons. So if you say book a radio cab and you're traveling, in Google Map, you'll see, like if you're ordering food from a home delivery agency, when you see the map, you'll see prisons popping up here and there. So we tagged that just to make, so people didn't know, like, oh God, I mean, is there a prison next to my house? Is there a prison in my locality? So just make the institution visible. And then we also created that system where if you tap onto that tag and then you get into it, you'll see how many people are staying over there. Do they have drinking water or not? Have they been vaccinated for COVID? So, suddenly giving an insight on them. So this is like there's no one way or one way of changing mindsets. But yes, social media is a thing, no, like it makes you think. Without I can write a book on prison or very serious reports on prison, but how will people read that? So getting so I mean, these are the ways we are working on it, and there are multiple ways we are coming up with like animations on prison, or it's a long journey.
Incredible. And I know that we've come to the end of our allocated 30 minutes, Smita, but if it's okay with you, I'd love to continue for another 5 or 10 minutes. And for those of our audience who do have to leave, we will be recording this session and be posting it on our social media channels and on our YouTube later on. But thank you. The reason I want to continue is because we're getting a lot of fascinating questions that are coming in for you, Smita. And so the next question I had was around, I mean, of course, you've spoken about data, which is very critical for your work. But from my perspective and from what I've experienced, I think to really understand the story of open prisons, it is through the stories of inmates, right? So could you perhaps share, Smita, the journey of an inmate that has personally stood out to you and sort of reaffirms your belief that this is a concept that needs to be scaled and normalized?
A story of an inmate, which if you go to that page, you'll find that story. So I met this person inside prison, and he didn't even know that there's something called an open prison. So his name is Manish, and Manish was there in Jaipur Central Prison when I was inspecting the prison. And Manish and Mukesh, and they were like the people who knew how to read and write. So I had asked them to do prison surveys and survey toilets for drinking water facilities, and they would keep on asking me that, I mean, what are you going to do with why do you want to know how many toilets are functional inside prison or not? So we used to have those kind of conversations, and then they would say, are you well read? Do you have another job? Then they said, "No, but why do you come to prison? Then why do you have to know whether we have drinking water, whether there's functional toilets or not?" So we would have these conversations, and then I told them that, this is a very expensive system, the prison system, and these toilets, water, maintenance, prison infrastructure, prison management. It's a superbly expensive institution, and the outcome of it is not very good. So there is an open prison system where you can just stay on your own, because inside prison also they are staying on their own. I mean, they are monitored, they are counted and everything. So I told them that there's a Supreme Court order and of the Rajasthan prison itself, and you can actually go to that prison. So they said, like, no, so do we file a petition or anything? I taught them how to draft a petition, and suddenly 200, 300 prisoners, they all filed petitions. And High Court, the Rajasthan High Court was like, there's a sudden upsurge on prisoners. So, it's like giving an individual that instrument of, it's an empowering exercise. Like when the Supreme Court order on open prison came out, taking that order to prison and showing that to the prisoners, it had a completely different standing, that order. And they started learning, reading about it, and started filing these petitions. And the same person, when I met him inside prison, he was so lost, he was disturbed, he didn't know what to do. He came out to the open prison and he set up his own business. He got married, he settled down, and he's like a big advocate for open prisons. And he always tells people that, if you have it in Rajasthan, we should have it in every other country, and this is how to go about it. So, and the level of confidence, I mean, an individual who's like around 40 years old, 6 feet tall man, who completely crushed by that system. I've seen it inside, right? And then when he came outside, and it's just the transition, and the beginning, the starting again and starting afresh. See, a lot of people can't start afresh, and if an institution is based on giving a second chance on that principle, and a second chance means a lot. So so it changes lives. And I can say about another prisoner, like she's a woman inmate, and I mean, she's completed a sentence and she's gone out, Pooja. So she was accused of murder of her husband. But when she came to stay in the open prison, her mother-in-law had nobody to look after her. So she actually kept her mother-in-law with her. And when I was going through her case, I could understand that it was a circumstantial incident. But anyway, I mean, she's anyway spent all her sentence in court. And but after that, she became so active with us. She's still active with us. So she's somebody who like, if you visit Rajasthan, these are the people who will come and tell you about open prison and tell you about the criminal justice system and all of that. So it's really empowering exercise.
Thank you, Smita, for sharing those two really empowering stories. We have a question from Ishika Sen Mukherjee, and thank you, Ishika, for this question. I mean, there's two parts to this question. The first one was, do you find open prisons to be rehabilitative? And I think we've come to that conclusion that you definitely do find it to be rehabilitative. But can you see this goal of rehabilitation being achieved without actually imprisoning people in the future?
Yeah, which is true. That's what that's actually what we are trying to talk about right now, right? I mean, this entire system of caging people. That's why we talk about making open prison a norm, because the system of caging prison actually doesn't work. And if you see that less than 1% of people who are actually habitual offenders, they can be really unwell people who doesn't need incarceration, will not stop crime. You see, one needs to talk about crime and say sexual offenses. It's a social, it's a perspective, right? That needs to be addressed. Just like putting a individual behind bars in a cage will not add to any solution in the society. So in fact, like open prisons are a system which actually encourages like doing away with a redundant caging. We live in an era we talk about not caging animals, right? I mean, we are against zoos. That's why we talk about sanctuaries and things like that. We can't, I mean, I don't know, we can't be okay with caging human beings. It just doesn't, it's, if you see it, you have to see it and feel that it's very disturbing. It just needs to stop.
And with that, I think, Smita, I think it's a perfect time to come to sort of the last question we have from our audience. If we look to the future, again, in 10 to 15 years, what do you hope the future will look like?
And we hope that the open prison in India will be a norm, and it's a great news. Like in Rajasthan, in spite of the pandemic, we all hated the pandemic. We still hate the pandemic, and we all had very disturbing, difficult times. But in the middle of the pandemic was a reason why the Rajasthan government decided to set up some more open prisons. So in the course of the pandemic, in this 2 years of the pandemic, 12 new open prisons were set up, because while in the closed prison, people were struggling with the pandemic. In the open prison, the prisoners were making sanitizers and helping other people, doing community service. And it was so, I mean, this is so in a challenging time like a pandemic, when it's a globally challenging time. Even the open prison system stood the test of this kind of a challenge itself, and prove that this is a better system, and it can be really it can really expand. So yes, I think in the next 10-15 years, mindsets are changing, and open prisons will be a norm. I'm very confident about it.
Wow, and I'm just fascinated to hear about those stories of radical empathy in practice of these inmates who come to the open prison, who during the pandemic have gone out to help others who have been struggling. Just amazing to hear, and gives us all encouragement and hope for this idea to grow and scale. And with that, Smita, I'd love to thank you for the time you've given us out of your busy schedule. I know, in fact, you've actually delayed your flight out of Bangalore just to speak to our audience today and share these insights. So we're very, very thankful to you. And we're also very, very thankful, Smita, to the audience that's joined and asked such encouraging questions. Welcome Change, as you all know, is a weekly series about the future that we all want to live in and the role we all can play. We have conversations that are coming up in the next few weeks on solutions journalism, on regenerative tourism in the Philippines, and Ashoka Fellows who are responding to the crisis in the Ukraine. You can sign up to these conversations that are coming up to the links below. And of course, the recording of today's conversation will be up on our social media channels over the next few days. But Smita, thank you very, very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Shantanu. It's been an honor, and thank you to the audience, and thank you, Ashoka, because a journey of a person like me, when we talk about social change, it's a very, very lonely journey. But when you meet all the other Ashoka fellows, and so there are a lot of people like me, so you feel assured that there are dreamers. It's not like I'm not that isolated idiot working on an imaginary mission. So it just feels good. It's really, really very, very, very kind of you.
Thank you very much, Smita. And with that, thank you very much. See you next time.
Bye. Bye bye.